Is Sneha with you? I just want to make sure that she's on the line or that she'll be joining.
Hi. She will be joining, I think. She has confirmed yesterday evening with me.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Satali, what do you think? Should we go ahead and get started?
I think we should reward the people who've come on time with an early start.
Yes, excellent. So hi, everyone. Again, my name is Marissa Straley. I'm with the SWA Secretariat team. I'm really pleased to have all of you join us for this webinar discussion after the sector ministers meeting. Some of you may be able to see me on video. You should also be able to see the first slide of our presentation, the welcome slide. I am going in front of the camera. Usually I don't do that for our webinars, but for this most important one, where we are very pleased to have two very high-level government officials join us for their reflections on the SMM, I thought it was appropriate to go in front of the camera. So if anybody would like to use the video when they speak, we encourage them to do so if you have a good internet connection, but do not feel obligated to do that. I've already said it a couple times. I will say it one more, please. If you could add your name to the chat, as well as where you're joining from, and if there's anyone with you. We really love to know who's participating and how we can continue to engage with webinar participants. So please do this for us. Today's discussion is focused on the outcomes and reflections of the sector ministers meeting, as well as to discuss actions that we can take forward after that meeting. Just a quick outline of how this session will go. We are very fortunate to have Dr. Huang from Vietnam and Mr. Zha from Myanmar, who will give their reflections from the meeting. And then we will also have reflections from several of our constituencies, the External Support Agency, the civil society organizations, and possibly the private sector. We'll see who's joined us if they're available. We'll have lots of time for discussion and follow-up questions. You're welcome to put questions or comments into the chat box, but please also feel free to take the floor and to speak and to use your video if you'd like to do that also. Let's see, our conversation will last about an hour and a half or so. Towards the end of the webinar, we have a bit of an interactive activity. So we'd really like your participation and hope that you can stay for the entire discussion. So we'll start with a summary of the sector ministers meeting. And for that, I will ask my colleague Satali to take over the floor.
Great, and thank you so much, Marissa, and good morning and welcome to this webinar again. It's really just exciting to have all of you from different countries and different institutions on this call. I know that for some people, they've had to wake up at 4 or 5 a.m. To be able to join this webinar, and others are staying very late. So try to be as efficient as possible. But to start, to just show you some of the photographs from the meeting, and you can be able to see most of these on the website, on the Facebook page for SWA as well. There are a lot of pictures there, more than 200. So if I have missed your face, you were at the meeting, and I have not put you here, it's just because I was picking a few, and I might have missed, not on purpose. Overall, we're really excited to have had the participation of different actors in the preparations for the sector ministers meeting. Most of you participated in that process. A lot of your countries submitted country briefs. In most of the countries and institutions, there were also several discussions about leave no one behind, and looking at what could be done to take this discussion forward. So what we have here is just a few slides to remind us again of the objectives of the sector ministers meeting, and as well as some of to give you a sense of what transpired in Costa Rica. So in terms of objectives, just as a very quick reminder, the sector ministers meeting was organized so as to increase awareness and understanding of Leave No One Behind. This is a theme that is under discussion this year through various fora, including at the high-level political forum of the United Nations. And in the trajectory of this of the sanitation and water for all, this topic was thought of as being relevant, considering that the first high-level political dialogue that we had in SWA after the SDGs were announced focused on understanding the implications of the Sustainable Development Goals. What did we need to do in order to be able to have the policies and plans to be fit for purpose? And so much of that discussion is what happened in 2016 coming into 2017. In 2017, we looked at the financing aspect, basically looking at how much is required to be able to achieve the SDGs, and what's the funding gap, as well as how can we close that funding gap. A number of countries use the costing tool to estimate their costing needs, and if your country did not use the tool and you haven't yet done a costing of the SDGs, that tool is still available. So the sector ministers meeting of 2019 was then aimed at picking a very central component of the Sustainable Development Goals of the SDGs, and looking deeper into that fundamental issue, and that issue being Leave No One Behind. And so the objectives being to provide a really high-level platform for decision makers to hold themselves accountable on this topic in terms of the planning and the policies, as well as the resourcing of this key principle. We also looked at how the SWA framework could help to take stock of progress, to better analyze the bottlenecks that are holding progress back, and identify corrective measures. We were also looking at ways to catalyze sector progress.
We can call you at one of your numbers if this is not working, but only thing is that you won't be able to see the presentations. So,
okay, sorry, so I had to mute that line. And the sector ministers meeting was also organized to increase momentum around the country cycle of planning, monitoring, and review. And you will notice that these objectives in a way generic because they are meant to respond to the different sector ministers meeting. But for the 2019 sector ministers meeting, the main focus was on Leave No One Behind, using these 4 objectives as the overarching framework. Now, the sector ministers meeting in numbers, we had a really good turnout. The confirmations we received before the meeting were upwards of 60 ministers, but things happened and some of them could not make it to the meeting. In the end, we had 53 ministerial level participants that made it to Costa Rica. We had more than 260 participants from 70 different countries. We had the privilege of having the president of Costa Rica to open the sector ministers meeting. We also had plenary sessions, 7 of these plenary sessions looking at different topics that were really fundamental to the topic of Leave No One Behind. And then we also had 3 different segments of the meeting when ministers when the meeting broke into what are called ministerial dialogues. These are breakout groups in which ministers take the lead in presenting the status of progress in their countries. They look at what they're doing. They ask questions from others in terms of what they would they're hoping to learn from others. And the 3 ministerial dialogues looked at financing, looked at the status of progress, and there was one on partnering, how to build effective partnerships. We also had more than 350 participants who participated in the preparatory process. This includes a lot of people who would be on the call today but may not have made it to Costa Rica. 47 governments tabled commitments before or during the sector ministers meeting, and these commitments emerged out of national discussions around sector progress. And so it was really pleasing to have these commitments from 47 countries. And in addition to the 47 countries, we also had 18 global organizations that tabled commitments. We also beamed parts of the sector ministers meeting live, and we had 150 participants that joined through that process. We had this time around the privilege of having the entire meeting being done in 3 languages, in Spanish, French, and English. And this meant that in the plenaries we did the 3 languages, but we also used the same languages in the various ministerial dialogues. Now, in terms of the discussions, or rather the key focus of the plenary sessions, this just gives you a picture of how the agenda was structured. So in plenaries, there was a discussion on the status of the WASH sector in terms of eliminating inequalities. We looked at what does it take to leave no one behind, specifically looking at the various building blocks and what needs to be done there. There was a discussion in plenary on the mutual accountability process, as well as a discussion on what really drives real progress. We ended the plenary sessions with lessons from the meeting, what we had learned in terms of what we're going to do next. And then you also see the 3 ministerial dialogues that we had at separate points of the agenda. I've already highlighted what those plenaries are. Just to give you a bit of insight into overall, I mean, it was a two-day meeting, really packed. So to pick a very concise summary, obviously there are a lot of things that will not be in this concise summary, but these are the things that generally came out in the plenary sessions as well as in the various ministerial dialogues. One, that the issue of leadership remains very central, and that this is leadership at ministerial level, but in some countries they've pushed that leadership at a very higher level, and they're getting the sector to be prioritized. We had the example of Nigeria, for example, which where they got the president to declare sanitation as a national emergency, which has really given the water and sanitation sector some good and serious visibility. This, of course, is in addition to the already known story of India, but even if India was not at the meeting, but just to add that this aspect of leadership is one that participants came back to several times. There was a very strong discussion on planning, monitoring, and review, which is very critical to charting the path going forward, especially in targeting leave no one behind, that the plans actually do need to respond to this issue. And if that has not been done, it is important to look at the plan and see how it can incorporate the issue of leave no one behind. In fact, some countries that tabled commitments also highlighted this as an area they were going to look at. Financing came up in several discussions, basically looking at, again, what's the funding gap, but also more importantly, how can we close that funding gap? How can we use existing resources more effectively, and what new financing exists, and how can we tap into that area? Partnership, which was discussed, it's a hard process, a hard issue to do, but it's necessary, and that's the only way we can actually cover so much ground and perhaps do it even faster. Data was a very key aspect that came up, especially in the discussion on what does it take to what are the drivers of progress. That data is actually very important for planning as well, and the quality at the moment of the data is one thing to look at. How that data is communicated and whether it's used in decision making, that came up as well. Then there were other a number of key contributors who highlighted the aspect of climate change and resiliency, and that we should not be forgetting this aspect as we discuss leave no one behind. I think in this regard, I could also add WASH in healthcare facilities as one of the areas that was also brought forward. There is a call to action which was put forward by the chair, the high-level chair, the Honorable Kevin Rudd, in which he highlighted 5 key issues that are calling upon ministers and participants to fulfill their human rights obligations and responsibilities, to identify the people who have been left behind, and assess how to address their needs. And this is where the issue of data comes in, to establish systems that integrate the laws and strong regulatory framework, as well as policies and institutions, to ensure that governments and partners are able to deliver services for all. And then also ahead of the next finance ministers meeting, which is next year in April, that we should focus a lot more on developing these financing strategies, as well as looking at their implementation. And his final call to action was that stakeholders need to be courageous, they need to take risks, that investments in sanitation and water actually pay off, looking at also the benefits in terms of the returns on investments. So these were the key aspects in terms of the call to action. And in terms of really things that come out, would like to leave this message in terms of the 5 key areas that the chair put forward as the call to action. So I will end at this point, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sitali. That was a really, really helpful recap of the meeting and the outcomes. We're going to jump right into the next set of presentations. And as I said, we'll have an opportunity for discussion. If you have any questions for Sitali, you can put them in the chat and we can bring them up in a little bit to discuss, or he can respond there as well. Sitali, just before I move on, there's the team from the Maldives isn't able to connect, so start to add their number to the chat. If you could dial them in, that'd be most helpful.
Yes, I'm doing that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Great. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our first high-level government official. This is Dr. Nguyen Huong. She's the Director General for for the Health and Environment Management Agency in the Ministry of Health in Vietnam. Dr. Huong, are you ready to take the floor?
Yes, thank you, Marisa. Can you hear me?
My pleasure. Yes, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you, Marisa, and SWA Secretary team to give me a chance to give some remarks in this webinar. And for Vietnam, there was only me to attend the sector minister meeting. Therefore, I could attend all the plenary sections and only some ministerial dialogues. And I also had a chance to have a formal meeting with Marisa and also Mr. Nên Dot, Focal Point of Private Sector Working Group of the SWA. So I would like to have some reflection for the sector minister meetings as follows. First, the meeting was well organized and very fruitful for me. The second, SWA could bring quite a lot of experts from the international organizations and country to give a very precious and realistic presentation. And what a surprise to me that almost all the SWA country president minister linked their personal life with sanitation and water. I was so impressed. For example, the president of the Costa Rica mentioned that sanitation in the many years before, his teacher already mentioned that the sanitation was a seed matter. You already see on the fly at the beginning, and also. Much of the discussion reflected the original thinking that went into the SWA collaborative behaviors and idea. And the fourth, Financing came out as a strong theme in the plenaries. Financing in infrastructure for water supply and sanitation services need to be triple. It's the same in Vietnam. In Vietnam now, the finance and the budget for the sanitation and water, especially for rural sanitation and waters, is less and less. Less international organization contribute or support to the sanitation and water, and not so many private sector are interested in the rural sanitation and water, because there's not much benefit for them to invest in. And the fifth one is, I learned, is during the meeting, many external support agencies made commitments around support to government in reaching service levels. The sixth, the climate change also was mentioned as a reason to make countries harder to achieve SDGs. And it's really true in Vietnam. Vietnam is one of the 5 countries that is most impacted by climate change. So we are in more difficult to achieve the SDG, especially the sanitation and water supply. The 7th, progress on the WASH is a prerequisite for achieving many other SDGs, such as SDG 4, education, SDG 3, health, and SDG 5, gender. And I still remember that I think president or chair of the International Women Union mentioned that the distance from house to the water source is a big barrier for the girls to get education. So I think it's really a very close link between the sanitation and water to the gender and also education. And the 8th, private sector should change their thinking. As Mr. Ahmed Mujthaba said, think different and see utility. You see, the toilet is not just the toilet, it's the whole change, from the toilet to the cleaning products to the waste management, etc. So if the government can think that, and the private sector thinks that, so they can get more benefit if they invest in the sanitation. And then the private sector only can help the government and people if the policy are there. And I link it to Vietnam. In Vietnam, there is not enough attractive mechanism to mobilize the involvement of private sector in rural sanitation and water supply right now. The next night, government should also think differently how people can do, and government should do differently. This is mentioned by Katarina in her speech. Information and data on what is really essential. If we don't have enough information and data, and the monitoring, the surveillance system as not available, we can not know the real situation of the sanitation and supply, and we cannot plan for the future action. And there are many challenges in the sanitation and water supply, especially in rural area and for the vulnerable people. We lack of institutional capacity, lack of financing, the sustainability of the system is poor, especially in extreme weather phenomena. And the translate data into the practice is also very weak. And there are many ministries in charge of what's causing problem for stakeholder, and also it's very difficult for the making for maintaining the collaboration between sectors and also stakeholders, and it also happens in Vietnam. And the last one is many countries submitted mutual accountability mechanism commitments to SWA. However, commitments are not clear.
You want to take some, like, do we have some?
Can we mute the? Go ahead, Dr. Huang.
Bubbly juice or something.
And was just copy from relevant program or project.
Excuse me, Dr. Huang. Sorry to interrupt you. I think if we could all just make sure that our lines are muted, that'd be great. Thanks, Dr. Huang. I'm sorry to interrupt. Yes, please go ahead. If you could maybe take a couple steps back and just maybe make your statement again.
From which one? I don't
know. No, just from a moment ago. Just a few words back would be great. Thank you.
It means the last one is about the mutual accountability mechanism commitment. Yeah. Many countries already submitted, but the commitments are not clear, had no time and indicators, and were just copied from the project or program. And Vietnam, for the draft commitments from Vietnam, it was not clear already, and we just copy from our national program and project. So it means yeah. So that's all 12 points that I take home. How to say, I take home 12 points from the meeting, and I already talked to UNICEF about this point to consider to improve our sanitation and water in my country. And then based on the knowledge I learned from the meeting, I make some follow-up action. First one, we have to revise mutual accountability commitment according to the guideline from SWA. And then before our commitments, all three commitments will come from the government. But now we will have one commitment from government, one commitment from Vietnam Women Union, and one commitment from private sector. And then in my country, the Ministry of Construction is the focal point for the SDG 6 implementation. And we would like to try to involve the Ministry of Construction, more involved of the Ministry of Construction into the sanitation and water. However, they are only responsible for public and urban sanitation only. So we also decide that the Ministry of Health will be the focal point for the rural sanitation and hygiene. And also we have a plan to organize meetings with different stakeholders, including private sector, to finalize the mutual finalize the commitments, and also mobilize involvement of research institute and private sector as well as monitor, review SDG 6 implementation and MUM implementation. And also I am working with Neil DeHart to find the private sector focal point and to scaling up the involvement of private sector into the rural sanitation in Vietnam. And we will submit SWA, the focal point of government agency, private sector, CSO, and research institute in Vietnam soon. During the meeting, as I mentioned, that many international organizations make commitment to help member country. So I also would like to ask SWA and also UNICEF to help us to find more international agency to support Vietnam, because Vietnam is a pioneer mutual accountability mechanism implementation. Such as we ask UNICEF to contact with the UNICEF headquarters and USS defeat WHO to mobilize their support to Vietnam. I think that's all our follow-up action in the very near future. For long-term activities, maybe we will provide you later in the next 2 months after we have a second quarter meeting of the second quarter sanitation and water partnership meetings in the next month. Yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Huang. That was really, really interesting to hear your reflections and to hear those actions. You have done quite a bit in the follow-up to the meeting, and it's really interesting to hear about the interest and the need in engaging the private sector, and it would be really interesting to hear. We'd love to have you back in a couple months' time just to hear how Vietnam continues to progress, and particularly how you continue to engage the private sector. I think many of our partners would be really keen to hear how that goes and maybe what lessons and opportunities there are from that. So thank you so much. Let's move on to our next speaker, and then after him we will leave plenty of time for discussion for any questions or comments you have. Our next speaker is Mr. Kant Zha. He's the Director General for the Department of Rural Development at the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock for Myanmar. We have your slides up. Mr. Zha, are you able to hear me and to see the slides?
Yes, see, and also able to hear.
Excellent, excellent. So if you would just like to say next slide or cue us when you'd like us to move on, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, please go to the next slide. So I will introduce. Yeah. So good morning, everybody. This is Ukanzo, Director General from Department of Rural Development from Myanmar. I'd like to set a ministerial meeting. Set that meeting a very good forum for learning and sharing experience. I got opportunity to compare Myanmar's work sector progress and also the other countries, and the theme leaving no one behind is a global priority and also very much relevant in Myanmar context. As soon as arrival from the meeting, I have some idea so how to review the existing Myanmar work sector. So that's why. So last week we have a work sector meeting with all actors who are working in Myanmar for the work sector, government, and also the NGO and private sector. So at that meeting, we decided to revise the national water strategy in line with the new SDG definition. Mainly, safe managed water and sanitation is needed because according to the data, there's no data for this safely managed. So we decide to include safely managed water and sanitation, and also because of the financing limitation, so our sector decide for the baseline data for the safely managed water and sanitation has to be collected. And also we are lucky. So coming inter-census data collection may start on 2019 November. So that's why we plan to include safely managed data. And also we decide to review and update the investment plan. Now we are implementation stage, already 2 years implementing. So that's why we need to review the existing investment plan, and we will develop the SETA financing framework within this year end to reflect the situation and to fulfill the need. So one of the challenges is now we have the rural water and sanitation strategy and investment plan, but there's no urban strategy. So that's why this is one of the issues. So that's why coordination body has to be established for addressing urban waste issue. So JICA and UNICEF can assist for that issue. Development of national level financing strategy to meet the SDG target. So according to the discussion point from this coordination meeting, so we will develop the national level financing strategy by the assistance of the UNICEF and other NGOs. For the political commitment point of view, so we already launched the water strategy and investment plan, and also newly just launched Sustainable Development MSDP, Myanmar Sustainable Development Plan, already include the for the SDG targets and in line with the SDG targets. To meet the SETA investment, because according to the last 2-year experience, so financing gave it a lot. So that's why. So we're trying to mobilize to get the fund from the government, and also we're trying to mobilize the Quran. And also now we are planning to link with the other sector like nutrition sector. We are now developing a project formulation with the EU. Now just plan. But implementation maybe next year, and also we're trying to learn not only nutrition but also other development activity with the washes. So please next slide. To follow up for the wash, for the general follow-up, so there will be a regular quarterly meeting, SETA coordination meeting we conduct by the leadership of the government, and also we invite all DP NGO or stakeholder, and also for the adoption of SDG goal with the service letter, we adopt this goal, and we were trying to call it this indicator, and CSO on Central Strategic Organization, a government organization who is taking care for the data for the whole country. National Indicator Framework adapt our wash indicator by CSO for the various government ministry, and according to the successful implementation of the pilot project, for example, the community managed water supply system, assisted by DFID and UNICEF, we are planning for the scale up for the whole country. So, for example, we started with the 110 pilot project villages. Now, we're trying to package for the successful wash project model throughout the country. Now, there may be more than 2,000 villages we can connect it to the household system. So, through that idea, for the open identification free campaign, so for the implementation of the school and health center, so there may be incentive for the community. If they want to implement school or health center, we can consider, so we can make awareness for the open identification, and they can participate for the open identification campaigns. These are the idea. Now we have the idea for the packaging for the successful work project model throughout the country. So for the follow-up commitment, policy and strategy, now we already have, but now we will develop national sanitation policy and cost investment plan. So this is, we just started and are processing. So consultation process at the state and regional level. So we targeted to the National Sanitation Policy and Costa Plan maybe November 2019. And also we will review and refine the existing real water supply subsector investment plan and financing strategy within this year. Organizing one sector coordination meeting with government leadership, this is a regular basis. So not only quarterly, but also if needed, so we will make monthly. And also we're trying to integrate simply managed water and sanitation services in inter-census coming 2019. And also we will establish the SDG baseline. So for the establish our SDG baseline for the wash in school and health facility, we just started for the wash in school baseline for wash in school and health for facility. So next slide, please. So for the post SETA minister meeting, so how Myanmar is planning to engage with the SWA. So according to the discussion with the SETA and with the UNICEF. So one of the challenges is the financing, so that's why. So we will refine and we will draw the financing strategy, and so we're trying to mobilize the various funding sources in the world sector, so from grant, loan, and other type of funding, and also the private sector investment. So for the private sector investment in Myanmar, so stay very limited for the private sector participation in business model for the sanitation, but so it is potential for the water sector, especially for the treatment system. Now we are piloting through the country a lot for the treatment system. So that's why private sector has potential to participate for this treatment system. And also now, even we have the good cooperation and collaboration, we're trying to strengthen and the existing cooperation and collaboration between union level and state and regional level. So we have quarterly meeting here at union level, but so there's no quarterly meeting at the state and regional level, township level. So last coordination meeting we decided so to form the coordination meeting to conduct the coordination meeting at state and regional level and also the township level. So we decided, and so we may start very soon. And also we want to participate like today webinar session, and also so we want to participate workshop and meeting for the international experience. So for the knowledge sharing and learning, so we just decide to establish in country knowledge sharing system. So not yet design, but so by using the our government website, so we can design, so we can collect all data and also this is the ideas, but not yet started. So this year we can start for the knowledge sharing and learning in country. For sanitation and water for all initiated to ensure national commitment for achieving now at the state and regional level consultation started for the national level dialogue. So as I mentioned, so we targeted to approve at 2019 October. So we can discuss maybe next coming SETA minister meeting at that time. So a government already may approve for this sanitation and water for strategy. Myanmar, we're trying to become also the member of the SWA. Now I'm discussing with the UNICEF Vishnu. So I like about the TOR. We need to know clearly about the TOR, and also we need to collaborate with the Ministry of Health and Sport and also Ministry of Education, because for the water sector in Myanmar, they are all together three ministries. So that's why even For DRD, we are ready to, there's no time and just participation, and so we have chance for the learning and sharing the knowledge. But so we need to get the approval of the Ministry of Education and also the Ministry of Health and Sport. So that's why. So we will continue the consultation with these two ministries. So, but really we want to be. And also for the national level swap dialogue, so we need your assistance. So that's why I like to invite SWA representatives to come and facilitate for the national level SWA dialogues. So these are all. Yes, these are all. That's all my presentation. So is there any question or comments? So please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zah. This is very, very interesting. Again, your reflections were so interesting to hear and to understand the actions that you're taking forward and to think through how Myanmar is going to continue to engage with SWA. I failed to mention this at the beginning, but that Myanmar is not yet a partner of SWA, and so really delighted to see that you're interested and keen to continue to engage with SWA in this way, and it's just excellent to hear. Before we move on to questions, I've just been informed by my colleagues that we do have another minister on the line. Minister Ahmed Mujthaba, please forgive me, I'm so sorry, I did not properly pronounce your name, but from the Maldives.
It's Mr. Ahmed Mujthaba.
Thank you, Zaza. Yeah. Thank you. Sir, would you like to make any comments? If so, the floor is yours. Is Maldives there?
Yes.
Minister Mujthaba, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
we can hear you, and lovely to hear your voice. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Yes, first of all, we thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. And we are indeed in this network of all these regulators. And now we are in the, I just wanted to say that we are in the process of bringing a revolutionary big change to the way the country has been actually governing this this sector. There will be a very big change in our efforts to provide sanitation and water to the people. Now, this new government has come up with a very ambitious program of providing water and sanitation to every island in the country. That's a big change, a big strategic shift, you know. Now the country has attained a level where we see the people of this country have to be given water and sanitation facilities irrespective of their population size. Now, as you know, Maldives has got a huge number of inhabited islands. And the population ranges from a very small population to big, say about 500-600 people to something like 10,000 people. Now, spreading these islands to an area of 800-900 kilometers is a huge task. Now, government has planned to complete the whole scheme in the next 5 years. So you can imagine how big the task would be, and it's going to be a big challenge on the ministry. Now we are in the process of actually planning these projects and implementing them. Now at this stage, the ministry is now having a very good monitoring and coordination mechanism. and also at the same time, we are going ahead with the regulation part as well. Providing the right framework for the regulation and also monitoring will be again a big task. So therefore, we really appreciate any efforts by our people, by people like you all, to give us expertise in this area, in the area of regulation and monitoring. We lack in these two areas. We have local expertise, which may not be sufficient when we go in such a large scale. We would really welcome you all if you can provide us any kind of expertise and leverage your strength behind us. Now, regarding the projects, we have demarcated the functions in such a way that we, the regulator, will concentrate on the regulation part and monitoring part, whereas there is a separate office for implementing projects. It's a huge, big efforts, big projects, and once completed in 5 years, this will be a true representation of how a country should act in this area, because the whole country will be covered, and people will have 100% people will have access to safe water and sanitation. So it's going to be a unique country, very unique country. Then again, as I said before, in the area of regulation and monitoring, we will really want foreign expertise. We will really welcome and appreciate your efforts in this regard. That's the comment I wanted to share with you. And once again, thank you very much indeed for giving us opportunity.
Thank you so much, Minister. That was really, really exciting to hear that you'll be undergoing such a change in the Maldives. And I just, if I could just share briefly your interest in regulations and monitoring. I think we've heard from many partners who have shared that they have this similar interest and need. And one of the things that the Secretariat is trying to do is trying to match partners with each other so that they can have some peer-to-peer engagement and learning from each other, particularly on this topic. So I know that Siddhartha and others will most certainly be willing to support you and reach out to other partners who you may have something to share and learn from as well. So thank you so much for those comments. Thank you to all of our speakers so far. We will open the floor for discussion. I know there's been a good bit going on in the chat, but I'm sorry, I haven't kept up with it completely as I've been trying to listen.
Marisa.
Yes, sir.
If you do not mind, I wanted to add one more point
Sure.
to the remarks you've made in response to the minister's call.
Yes.
Honorable Minister, we are so grateful that you joined us and for outlining those key areas very well. As Marisa has indicated, we are very keen to connect you with other partners who might have expertise in that field, and also other governments that might already have taken steps in that area. We are aware that there was, I think, already one request, particularly in terms of looking at monitoring and information systems. So we could maybe bring a group of countries together in that learning process so that you could mutually have a support system among countries that are interested in that area. The issue of regulation is also, as Marisa has said, one that's very key and that one that's coming up very often. In Costa Rica, we had the privilege of listening to the former regulator from Portugal, who was able to bring their experience. But we also know several other countries where they're dealing with, say, the first generational issues when it comes to regulation. So in that regard as well, that's an area where we would be interested to provide the support that we can in terms of linking and also identifying the right moments and support that could help build, collaborate with you. The area of coordination is one where most SWA countries and partners are really doing some interesting things. And so that too is an area we could provide linkages. I wanted to end by saying that on our website, we've got a tools portal. And this portal, which we're just putting in the chat, but we'll send it also to the focal points in your ministry. On the portal, there are different tools that can be used looking at various aspects of the sector. And so we think that maybe that might be a good place to also see if there's a tool that's interesting to look at in terms of monitoring, in terms of regulation, in terms of some supporting materials that might exist. These tools are tools that are developed by various partners in the sector. So I thought we could just highlight that as also one area of support, but we'll definitely pick up this conversation with the focal points going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Satali.
And just to add, Marisa, just for a few seconds, just to add, what I'll do is that I'll start coordinating with Mr. Mujthaba after this to take the conversation forward.
Great, thank you.
This is Siddhartha here. Yeah.
Okay, let us move on to the discussion, open discussion. I'm just also mindful of the time. We would like to have representatives from our other constituencies speak. So let's go to the floor to see if there's any questions for any of our first set of speakers. I know, Dr. Kuang, you mentioned that you'd like to make a comment. If you want to take the floor.
Okay, thank you, Marisa. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I have one more point to share with you, all of you here, that Vietnam, end of November, this November, Vietnam would be willing to be the hosting country for steering committee, SWA steering committee meeting. So I think if SWA steering committee meeting can be organized in Vietnam, it is very, very good opportunity for us, because we can have some high-level meeting with other relevant ministry, like Ministry of Construction, Ministry of Agriculture, and also Ministry of Health, and possible Ministry of Finance. So if we have a chance to work together, so this is a good opportunity to get the concern and the priority from the government, from ministry, relevant ministry, to mobilize on resource for water sanitation and hygiene. And I think this also is a very good opportunity to mobilize, to work with other ministry and other stakeholders, how they can integrate water sanitation and hygiene into other current program or projects. So I think yeah. So Vietnam welcome SWA steering committee in Vietnam and this November. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Kuang, and we're grateful for that invitation from the government of Vietnam for sure. Let's see, any other questions or comments? Satali, Siddhartha, is there anything you've noticed in the chat that we should make sure we address?
Marisa, can I ask a question, please?
Sure, please, go ahead, yes.
Thank you very much, and again, good morning from Kabul to all. We're here, two colleagues. Mr. Javid is also the SWA alternative focal point with me. So it was a great discussion, and we were very unfortunate that we couldn't manage to make to the SMM in Costa Rica. Yeah. I also went through the concept which was developed, and that's very interesting. And my question was, what would be the follow-up in terms of all those commitments? I mean, in terms of reporting and follow-up, is there any mechanism also discussed that how the progress and the challenges would be discussed after this? So that was something, because as a focal point, we wanted to know what would be our next, sort of interventions in this. Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely. That's a really great question. Sitali, would you like to address that? I don't think we have Virginia on the line.
No, we don't have Virginia on the line. But if you could just stay on, because that is in the next set of slides. And just to indicate that there's a really interesting exercise that we will do towards the end, which is also about the follow-up. Engineer Ghulam, yes, there is a response in terms of some of the follow-up on the accountability mechanism, on the commitments as well. Sam from Cambodia just indicated that I think the link on the website is not working, because that's where you can see the commitments that we received before the meeting. But we will be looking into that just to make sure it's working well. We have some very clear sort of requests and actions that will come to in the next set of slides, if you do not mind holding. Thank you.
Thank you, Sitali. Other questions, comments that people would like to make? I see a note here from Cambodia, and it says Cambodia is not a member of SWA yet, but learned that there will be a finance ministers meeting next year. Could Cambodia be invited? When will it be? What preparation should the country office support and prepare? Sitali, would you like to take that one as well?
Great question. We've now just started discussions in terms of the concept of how that meeting will look like, and also looking at what would be the very sort of pertinent issues to look into. So I think that we'll have a very clear response by the end of June. The steering committee is meeting in June. I think that it is very likely that an invitation will be extended, but it would also be very possible by then that Cambodia joins. The process to join SWA is very simple, and we'll be happy to speak with you about that. In any case, as we did for the SMM, invitations are also extended to countries that are interested in becoming partners of SWA. So I do not see a problem with that, but let's wait until we see the concept by the end of next month. Thank you.
Thanks, Sitali. Okay, one more call for questions or comments at this point, and then we're going to move forward to our next set of interventions. No? Okay. Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much to our high-level government speakers and the Minister from Maldives for joining this discussion and presenting their reflections. We felt it was extremely important to also have reflections from various other constituencies that participated in the SMM. So first, I'd like to invite Sneha. Sneha, are you on the line? I think you might be. Sneha?
Hi, Marisa, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Great, thank you. So we have representing the civil society organization constituency, Ms. Sneha Latha, and she's with FANSA. Could you give us, your reflections and the actions that FANSA is taking forward?
Yes, Marisa. To briefly introduce, I just would like to just briefly say what FANSA is. It's a freshwater action network for South Asia, and we are 400 plus organizations working in 8 countries in South Asia, and each country is having one FANSA chapter, and we work with all the 8 countries. Of course, the Bhutan and Maldives chapters still need to be formally registered and then work with the government. But in all the 8 countries, we are working with the governments, and then we have been making a lot of good progress, especially on the concept of leaving no one behind. In fact, FANSA plays a key role in the SACOSAN, where we organize the session on Leave No One Behind in the plenary session by bringing the voices of the people to the key decision makers across South Asia. So that's just a brief introduction to FANSA, and then what we are going to do as part of taking forward the SMM outcomes. So as you said, I think precisely, let me just put it, the key takeaways for FANSA from the SMM is that everybody needs to ensure that in the light of human rights to water and sanitation, to keep the leaving no one behind is the key principle for us to achieve wash for all. So keeping this principle in mind, and then looking at what we learned from SMM, that is, without ensuring strong leadership, sustainable finance, and the government-led participatory planning with ensured monitoring and accountability mechanisms, achieving this leave no one behind concept at country level would become impossible. So now to take forward this, and also to realize the key message of the SWA chair on how we take this to the finance ministers meeting in 2020, we have got certain action points that we would like to do it at the country level in all the 8 countries and also at the regional level. And before I move on, I also would like to give another strength of FANSA, that FANSA also hosts the SWA Secretariat. So that means we also work with the SWA processes, and also Siddharth is housed with us. So we work very collaboratively with all our partners, both at the CSO level and as well as at the government level. So keeping this advantage behind, what we would like to take forward is first to disseminate these SMM outcomes among all the CSOs through our network chapters, and then disseminate this information through webinars as well as through a note, and also through follow-up Skype calls if there are any gaps or any information or clarifications that are required by the CSOs. And after that, I think the important thing is, once you disseminate the lessons from the SMM or the outcomes, how are we going to really, practice them on the ground? So we are going to give key inputs to our country partners in terms of giving an application of the costing tool, basically developed by the SWA, how to really, finance this leave no one behind groups, and how do we reach these groups, both on the processes as well as on the policies to reach these people. So we are going to work with the countries very collaboratively, and then with all the governments as well as with the sector stakeholders, both at the country level as well as the regional level. Again, the regional level task force team that has been formed recently will be instrumental to push this concept forward, or to take forward these outcomes. And then another important thing that we are going to work very closely with is the mutual accountability mechanisms by building these multi-stakeholder platforms. Again, here I would like to emphasize, most of the FANSA country focal points are also the focal points of SWA. There is again a synergy at the country level to take forward this mutual accountability mechanisms in a much more collaborative and then integrated manner. And then by specifying the roles and responsibilities of each of these organizations, so that there is no duplication of efforts by us. So that is how we are going to do, and we are going to have periodic meetings, both in terms of Skype calls as well as webinars that we are planning to take forward as part of this. And we feel that the joint sector review is another important aspect where we are going to work on assessing the sector progress. Again, we have got an experience in this particular thing, both in terms of bringing forward the status of SACOSAN commitments through traffic light papers that FANSA has been developing and producing for the last 4 SACOSAN. So we are going to use this and joint sector review as a platform to look at how we are progressing on the ground. And then we are also are part of the SWA strategy development, and FANSA would bring together the CSO's perspective and the challenges that CSOs face in terms of working with the governments, and then also on the finance and as well as the critical national platforms which are working towards the SDG 6 progress. Again, we have got a critical evidence or the accountability study that FANSA has carried forward, has good lessons on what the countries are in terms of reaching to the SDG 6 goal, and what kind of integration is happening at the whole alignment of SDG indicators to the national policies and indicators. So we are going to look at those things as well, and keeping what we already have as a baseline, we are going to again look at those things, and then all the country briefs that are prepared by the 8 countries for the SMM, we are going to complete that task, and then be in touch with the countries to look at what is happening, and also the country commitments.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but if we could ask you to wrap it up a little bit.
Yeah. I'm going to just 1 more minute. I'm just saying that we are going to follow up with the countries through our country chapters and take this forward in a collaborative way with the SWA Secretariat, and then with the mutual accountability mechanisms on the focus. Yeah, that's it from my side, Marisa.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and I'm sorry to cut you short, but we do want to have a few more comments from people. Let's see. I'm just going to double check. We had invited Évariste Coleman to speak, and I didn't see him, but I'll just make a call. Évariste, are you there? Okay. It doesn't seem that Évariste is on the line. Okay, before we do move on to the next presentation, I just wanted to invite Gerard. I believe you're on the line.
Yes, I am.
Hi, Gerard. If you'd like to make a comment now, we'd certainly welcome it. No pressure, but if you'd like to. And this is Gerard from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade from the Government of Australia.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I won't say much.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we weren't present at the SMM, but we are clearly very keen on a continued partnership with SWA. We can see the value of what the partnership offers. I was reminded of that by the presentation from Vietnam and the comments made about the lack of interest and the lack of domestic financing and lack of private sector interest or capacity to deliver wash services in rural areas, and that remains one of the biggest challenges we have in terms of leaving no one behind. So we look forward as a very interested observer, and hopefully in the future as an active participant in SWA processes. We are very keen to see an effort to increase specific membership and in close discussions with SWA about that. That's about it.
That's excellent. Thank you. We really appreciate your participation and definitely would like to have you as closer partners moving forward. Okay, I don't believe we have anyone from our private sector constituency on the line.
I'm here, Nicholas.
Nicholas. Yes. Would you like to make some brief comments about your reflections of the meeting and the actions that the constituency is taking forward?
Sure, I'll be very brief.
Thank you.
I was fortunate to attend the meeting with Dr. Minister from Vietnam, with Neil Dot, and I was part of making the follow-up. So I think I have a good insight about what's happening in Vietnam, which we welcome very much. I'll make basically 3 points. Our takeaway from the private sector is there is a need for regulation framework. We can't operate as a private sector if we don't have that. That's the first point. The second point is, and it's been said several times, the leadership at the national level and then also regional level is required. That's the case for any organization, corporation, and so on. If you don't have the leadership at the top, nothing is moving. And the third point, which is also has been said several times, and it's also the same in corporations, in business. If you don't have data, and if you don't follow, and if you don't monitor, nothing happens. So these are the 3 things that are necessary, and we can name them part of the enabling environment for the private sector to operate. And the last point, when we have these 3, for the private sector to cooperate, collaborate, intervene, take action, flow in money, finance, projects, and so on, the mutual accountability mechanism is critical in country. And for me and for the private sector, this is very, very important to figure out collectively at the SWA how we're going to push this forward. I'll stop here.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Thank you so much, Nicholas. We really appreciate those comments and that reflection. Let's see. Siddhartha, are you ready to discuss the sort of life beyond the sector ministers meeting?
Absolutely, Marisa. Yeah, thank you so much. And just give me an indication of how much time we have, because I think we have already overshooted the time.
We have, yes. Yeah. Yes. No, I would say the last 12 minutes are yours.
Okay. Thank you so much. Let me just open up my video. Once again, a very good morning to everybody, and thank you so much for attending. I can see that we have almost 40 participants now, and almost 14 countries being represented. So I think that's a great diversity we are having here. Also, thanks to people who have attended in spite of the different time zones, and I know there's a Ramzan month also happening. So thank you so much to everybody like me for making all these adjustments. So coming straight to the beyond SMM aspects. Next slide, please. So basically, we are proposing to focus on 5 categories of activities. One is doing advocacy at the highest level, which means like direct advocacy with the sector ministers, heads of states, the finance ministers. Planning and strategizing based on the evidence. Now we have already drawn up commitments. We have also taken forward a few learnings from the SMM. So using those learnings, we can always start our planning process and accordingly strategize. Implementing and reviewing the commitments. As Sitali has already mentioned, that various constituencies have already submitted commitments, and it's very important now to actually do a follow-up on the commitments and implement those. Incorporate leave no one behind aspect into all the sector processes, because that is the ultimate vision we are having as a sector, to actually focus on the leave no one behind, which will help us in achieving the objectives of SDG 6. Also, documenting and disseminating the experiences would be extremely important, especially for cross-learning aspects. One of the things we are proposing is that to make a 6-month SMM follow-up plan, which includes all of the above 5 categories which I just now mentioned. By doing that, we can actually help in building and maintaining the momentum at the highest levels, because it's not only about events, it's about, like, I would say that the work starts after the end of these events, and we need to really operationalize the decisions which we have taken during these events and follow up. It's also important to develop a common understanding of what needs to be done. Since this entire framework and process involves multi-stakeholders, it's very critical to help define the roles and responsibilities of the different stakeholders involved in the entire process. Post SMM, it's very important to also contribute to and benefit from the national processes, because things need to be aligned to the overall national process. That's very critical. As far as the SWA Secretariat is concerned, we are always here to support you all, to assist you. So just do let us know wherever you need any support. And we can also share the experiences of others with you, because cross-learning is very, very important, which can help in further replication. Next slide, please. Yeah. So, like I already mentioned, now raising the level of the engagement with key decision makers, like we are engaging at the highest levels of bureaucracy. It's important that we continue our engagement with the sector ministers. We also start engaging with the heads of states, other relevant ministers like the finance ministers, other ministers who are involved in the WASH process, for example, the different ministries of health, the ministries of education. So it's very important to actually mainstream the entire aspect and ensure some convergence. Aiming high will be extremely critical, reaching the highest decision makers and advocate for their support around the priorities and commitments which we have already prepared. That would be really critical. It's also, in terms of operationalization, it's also important to present the results of the preparatory process of the SMM to the key decision makers, which includes the government officials, ministers, heads of states, the civil society organizations, the private sector, the research and learning organizations, and also the external support agencies. If possible, organizing a post-SMM ministerial briefing will be really useful, calling the ministers and other senior government bureaucrats and giving them a briefing about the SMM. That might be really useful to actually develop a common clarity. It's also important to arrange regular interministerial dialogues involving the ministers responsible for water, sanitation, hygiene, finance, planning, social affairs, education, health, etc., especially from the mainstreaming point of view, because convergence of the different ministries is extremely important. And one of the learnings which we have taken forward through feedback from different ministers during the sector ministers meeting is that many of the ministers were raising concerns about the lack of convergence with other departments. And these concerns were raised during the ministerial dialogues during the sector ministers meeting. Another critical aspect would be involving the media in the entire process, because media, as we know, they can play a very critical role in actually spreading the message and disseminating the different messages. Next slide, please. Yeah. So mobilization of the relevant stakeholders, which we have been talking about. So it's critical that several government representatives, like many of the government representatives, and even during today's call, have indicated strong interest in inviting key sector actors such as the private sector and research and learning institutions to the national dialogues. So while working with focal points, SWA partners can identify and invite relevant stakeholders to join their national sector platforms for planning, implementing, and reviewing the entire process on WASH targets of the SDGs. And in each of the SWA partner countries, there should be ongoing multi-stakeholder dialogues on water, sanitation, and hygiene, involving the government and also involving the other relevant sector players here. we have already spoken about using evidence generated through SMM for decision making, and that includes it's important that we get into it, including guiding programs of other stakeholders, such as the external support agencies, civil societies, research and learning agencies, and other direct stakeholders who have been directly involved. The UN Water Glass has recent results from the survey of external support agencies, which again provide highlights that can be used for deepening the dialogue and generating evidence in helping the political leaders to make decisions. Talking about GLASS, again, using results from the GLASS country highlights, which provide more up-to-date information on the status of the sector, especially related to the policies and plans and other aspects of the enabling environment, such as the financing, human resources, and monitoring. So the GLASS data also can be extremely useful, and we are always there to support you in case if you find any difficulty in using the GLASS data. It's important to also identify and include the leave no one behind themes in national dialogues. So in different areas such as financing, partnering in practice, accountability, regulation, elimination of inequalities, human rights, among others. Also, it's very important to make the case at national level for developing financing strategies and prepare to write these strategies as well as the implementation plans. And we, all of us are convinced that financing is a very, very critical aspect, and that needs to be really focused by us as a sector. Next slide, please. Yeah, so talking about the mutual accountability mechanism, so many commitments have already been submitted. So it's critical that we review all those commitments, and we also ask ourselves few pertinent questions. Few of those are whether our governments have made commitments, which institution within the government have made those commitments, has the institution tabled commitments, if not, whether they can still table the commitments. Following the information shared during the SMM, should the commitments be revised? Because again, we do understand that there was a time pressure before the SMM to actually submit the commitments. So we can always relook into the commitments and do an analysis whether those commitments need to be revised. Have government and other country commitments been shared with the relevant stakeholders? Because the importance of sharing the commitments with other stakeholders is extremely critical. Is there a process to nationally, locally monitor and review the commitments? And I'm sure in most of the countries, there is a national review mechanism which can actually align with these commitment aspects and continue reviewing the commitments. So that will be extremely critical. Also, we understand that commitments also can be a dynamic process. Things might change based on the policy and the other targets. So if there is any updated commitments, if you want to change your commitments and update it or modify it, please do share it with us, and we'll make the necessary changes in our website where the commitments have been included. Next slide, please. Now, coming to the tabling of commitments, most of us know that most of us have already tabled those commitments using a particular link given in this particular slide. Now, while analyzing those commitments, we have come across some common pitfalls, which we would like to bring to your notice. And some of those are: few of the commitments did not mention any time frame, or the time frames were too short, which we thought were a little bit unrealistic. So that is something which needs to be relooked into while you are reviewing your commitments. Few of the commitments are not aligned in the national development plans or the SDG plan. So that alignment aspect is very important, and that needs to also to be reviewed for few of the commitments. Many of the commitments also we found were not inclusive. So it needs multi-stakeholder consultations. In a few cases, what has happened is that just one or two institutions from that particular government or from that particular country actually prepared the commitments and submitted. But it's very important that multi-stakeholders are actually consulted before finalizing those commitments. Again, coming to few of the commitments being too ambitious or unrealistic, that is something which needs to be relooked into. Some of the commitments were again not clear, like either those were incomplete or those were too complex. So it's important to also look into the overall language and make it as simple as possible. It's also important to actually focus on action of others, like more attention on support to others and not needed changes internally, especially for non-government actors. So again, it comes back to the multi-stakeholder involvement, and that is very, very critical as far as the overall commitments are concerned. So what we need to also do is that we need to do a reality check of those commitments. We need to relook into the language. We need to relook into the time frames and on the overall targets. So because commitments is a serious thing, and that is something we need to really work into once we finalize those. Before moving into, okay, yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah, now linking with the ongoing national processes, and that is something which we have been discussing, like mainstreaming or incorporating results of the Leave No One Behind analysis and SMM outcomes in the overall budgeting exercises of the country. That is something which needs to be done, and that's one of the reasons we are also doing high-level meetings like the finance ministers' meetings, because we do realize that everything needs to converge at one particular point. Leave No One Behind needs to be included in all multi-stakeholder dialogues, all reviews, and in all the joint sector reviews which are happening in most of the countries. The results of the SMM in global review processes such as voluntary national reviews also needs to be aligned actually. So the idea is that whatever national review processes are happening, the SMM or the commitment process needs to be actually incorporated into that, so that it becomes a single approach towards achieving those SDG targets. Strengthening linkages with the subnational planning and review processes, that is something again which needs to be done. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So what we'll continue doing is that we'll continue identifying, documenting, and sharing experiences on leaving no one behind. And from the SWA Secretariat, we'll continue organizing these webinars, which will focus on the Leave No One Behind aspect till the end of 2019. We'll also encourage documenting experiences on working together to implement the entire SWA framework. The results from the country JSRs or the ASA survey highlights can also be useful tools for actually documenting and sharing interesting experiences. Our communication platforms are always there, which can be used to actually foster exchanges of ideas and resources. Coming to the request for support to connect with other partners, so that is something which we constantly encourage to foster peer-to-peer learning partners so that they can reach out to each other, or you can also request the Secretariat to facilitate that cross-partner learning, and that is something we'll be very happy to do. The SWA Secretariat exists to nurture such collaborations even across in spite of language and regional barriers, but that is something which we are happy to do, and we'll continue doing that. So the only thing we need from you is that you keep letting us know about the areas of support you require, also in terms of cross-learning and learning from other constituencies. So that is something which we want to continue doing with your support. So before moving into the next exercise, I would just like to stop here and would be happy to take a few questions. If you have any quick questions, we can try taking those up. I think we have already reached the 1.5 hour mark, but just in case if you are having any quick questions, or you can also put it in the chat and we can address those. So before calling it a day, I think we'll be needing another 5 minutes or so, and we have a very small exercise. Can we move on to the next slide?
Yes, Siddhartha, just to say there was a question from Sam in Cambodia about the commitments and what the next steps are. Sam, just let me know, because you might have sent this question before Siddhartha brought up those 2 slides. So let us know if you still need clarity there. I see that Murali has put something also in the chat. So Siddhartha, we can just take a minute maybe to look at that. And so I'm just looking at what Murali says. I thank everyone for sharing such wonderful thoughts. And how do
very quickly say that.
Yeah.
Can I?
Yes, Murali, we can hear you.
Yeah, I think all the thoughts shared by the presenters and from honorable ministers from the countries are great thoughts. I think there's no effort required to add anything further. There are really wonderful thoughts. I just want to emphasize on two things. I think the multi-stakeholder platforms at the country level is something very important to really take forward these ideas into action. This requires very sincere kind of effort from all the actors, including government, sector partners, civil society, everyone. And number two, I think we need to have a very robust mutual accountability mechanism, which should be a kind of guiding mechanism for the functioning of multi-stakeholder platforms. I think if these two things are there in place, I would see very good possibility of taking all the great ideas into action. I think those are two most important things from my point of view. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Murali. That's very helpful. And it's just coming back, Sam is saying, is there an agreed timeline for revision development? Yes, Sam. So the request from us would be that if the commitments, if you're reviewing the commitments, would be happy to receive any changes that are made to those commitments by the end of this month. If you need more time, please do not hesitate. Let us know. And also in terms of the reporting on those commitments, we ask that the reporting be done through that national platform. Could be the JSR at country level, could be the sector coordination meeting, that they should be reviewed and discussed through that process. And whenever that happens, when you have a progress report, please share that report with us. But in terms of any changes that are made to the commitments which were already sent to us, or new commitments, please, if the changes can be made by the end of this month, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Should we move on then to the Mentimeter?
Yes.
Yes.
Which one of you would like to explain it?
Okay, I could do it. Thanks everyone. So we've got this exercise that we hope you could help us just to get a bit of feedback on the discussions we've had today, and for us it is a way to know what items you're planning to take going forward. So if you could pick up your phone, or if you're using your laptop, just pull it up, so then you could go to this website called www.menti.com. When you go there, it will ask you to put in a code. And the code that you put in is 479491. So you can use your phone, you can use your laptop, or whatever gadget that you have that can access the internet. And let's see, when you get there, I'll just show you what you will see, and that will, so let's see if people could start getting to that site.
I hope most of you are able to access this site.
Can people access it? Okay. So we're going to, I'll share my screen just so people can see it.
The code is 479491.
Yes. Okay.
So once access it, it'll ask for a code, and you have to enter that code.
Can I ask? I don't understand the question.
Oh, Dr. Huang, we're asking you to use your phone or your computer.
Yeah, I get in already. I check in already.
Okay,
But there's a table new commitments. What do you mean? It means the countries or SWA?
It means at the country level. So, for example, do you think that you will revise the commitments that you already made?
Okay.
If so, in that line which says review existing commitments, you would pick the one that says strongly agree. So you would say that you want to revise that commitment. if your institution or your government has not tabled commitments, and this could be at an organization level such as UNICEF or an institution, if you have not tabled commitments, you could say table new commitments if you intend to do that. Okay, so I'm not seeing any movement here, so I'm not sure whether people have actually made it to this platform or not. Yeah.
So basically, against these questions, you have to give some rating and accordingly drag that with your mouse.
Thank you. So people are responding to
that. Sitali, the last question where we can type our actions, that's not working for me. Okay, can you please check whether it is functional?
You will be able to type in the next slide, which will come shortly after this. But I can see that people are entering the numbers now. So quite a good number of people are saying they would be planning to organize a high-level multi-stakeholder dialogue to discuss the post-SMM actions. And some will be reviewing their commitments. Okay. That's good. Thank you. Okay. So we will. Okay. So I'll give it just 10 seconds or 15 seconds, then we'll move to the next slide. The next slide is where you can then type any actions that are not listed here that you plan to do. So here now, are you planning any other type of action that was not listed there? So you can just type that and submit. And we'll be happy if you can put just the name of your institution in case we had to make any follow-up. So Morali, were you able to get to that page?
And could I just ask if everybody could mute their lines? That's great. Thank you so much.
And maybe people are still typing. So for those that say that they want to do other activities, we're just expecting that you could indicate in here what those other activities are. Marisa, are you able to see my screen?
On the Menti, or do you mean on the presentation?
On the presentation.
No.
Okay. Okay. So nobody has entered anything here in terms of additional actions. So I will move to the next slide, which is the last one. What support would you like from the Secretariat or other partners? So here's where people can just indicate any support that they would like. And if you could just type and add the name of your institution, and we can take 2 minutes to do that, then we should close it. Okay, so these are some of the comments that, okay, we'll just go back here. I'm sure you can see the screen now. So on the first question, in the next 2 months, we plan to do the following actions. So we have a number of you that have said you are planning to organize a high-level multi-stakeholder dialogue, and then a number that are saying you'll be reviewing commitments, tabling new commitments, and then using budgeting processes, as well as sharing relevant experience, and then a few that said other. For those that said other, these are some of the additional comments. Mobilize involvement of other ministers, international organizations, private sectors. So this is really good to know that this will be this is being planned. What we're missing here, and it will be good for people just to get in touch with us, are the indications of which institution, for example, said they would like to mobilize the involvement of other ministers because we'd like to see and be able to support, if possible. Generating evidence on leave no one behind and support governments in addressing the issue of marginalized. Okay, so that's also good, just that we are not able to know who put that in, and we'll be happy to, it would be good if we were able to know. We've got Mongolia there as well, UNICEF, and a national workshop on WASHPAT. Okay, so this is good, but we don't know where this will be, sector development plan. So if people could just at some point later let us know who put some of those comments. Support from Secretariat, facilitation of multi-stakeholder country consultation process in Bangladesh. All right, thank you. And calculation of SDG costing too, perfect. So that's very clear. Those are also things that we can very clearly support on. SWA participation together with UNICEF, EAPRO, WASH experts. Okay, that's good.
Which constituency was that? SWA participation together with the UNICEF WASH experts?
Yes,
if you can just shout, yeah. Was it Mongolia? I think Lakham Sarjit mentioned something in a chat a few minutes back.
Okay, so some of this was from Murali. I think we can follow up also. But otherwise, I think we should bring it to a close. I think this has been helpful in terms of seeing what support and actions colleagues are planning. Okay, we've got Vietnam. Okay, so there's a comment also from DFAT in terms of the full list of national commitments as well as follow-up actions. Okay, thank you. Seek more advice on the preparation to be a member. Okay, this is great. So thanks. I think we'll keep this open just in case people are still adding comments. Please do so, and we'll compile the final results and follow up individually. But thank you very much. Marisa, over to you.
Thank you so much, Satali, and thank you again to everyone. We went well over our allotted time, but we're so grateful for your participation. Very grateful again to all of our speakers for sharing their thoughts, their reflections, the actions that they're taking forward. I think there's a lot that we can collectively do to work with each other and support each other. And so it's just really exciting to hear all the opportunities and actions that people are taking forward. So with that, I will close the webinar. We'll leave the line open for another few minutes in case there's any questions or comments that you have for any of the Secretariat team. But otherwise, thank you so much and have a great rest of the day and evening for some of you as well. Thank you.
Thank you from Bangladesh, Munit.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much.